Pozdravljeni in dobrodošli na okrogli mizi Zmagujemo. Današnji dogodek je del programa Evropske arhitekturne platforme LINA, ki jo koordinira Fakulteta za arhitekturo Univerze v Ljubljani v sodelovanju s skladom arhitekta Jožeta Plečnika. Zahvaljujemo se vam, da ste danes z nami. Pogovor bomo pa nadaljevali v angleškem jeziku.
Thank you, Hana. Welcome to the Are We Winning Roundtable, which is organized by LINA Platform, Faculty of Architecture, as an accompanying program to the Plečnik Awards ceremony 2023. We'd like to thank you to the City Museum of Ljubljana for hosting today's event. With this roundtable, we're questioning the world of hidden as well as very visible problems of the architecture award giving.
So, architecture prizes are a powerful tool for guiding the development of the architectural profession. Despite their proliferation in numbers and vocal protestations, their popularity never seems to wane, as they continue to garner media headlines. Chief among the complaints are insinuation the juries award prizes on the basis of beautiful photographs rather than the physical experience of the buildings themselves, and warnings against that prizes held in a hermetically sealed professional environment serve only their own end and are a mere promotional tool. It seems that it's no longer clear what the purpose of architectural prizes is and what effect they're supposed to achieve. For this reason, the LINA Platform has teamed up with the Plečnik Fund to organize Are We Winning?, which is a program that invites a critical reading of the institution of architecture prizes. We have invited two emerging architects, Francesca Beltrame from Italy and Allan Mensah from France, to create this program with us. Yesterday, the 2023 Plečnik Awards were conferred. These are the most prestigious and long-lasting Slovenian architectural awards. In the past year, these awards have undergone a thorough rework, from its organizational structure all the way to their criteria. With that, I'd like to introduce the guests of today's roundtable. So, Boštjan Vuga is the head of the Plečnik Foundation. Matevž Čelik is the head of LINA. Dr. Mateja Kurir, PhD, is the manager of LINA. Blasi, sat over there, is the coordinator of Mies van the Rohe Foundation. Allan Mensah is a LINA fellow, architect, publicist, and pedagogue at INSA Lyon. And Roth Čerina, architect and professor at the Faculty of Architecture in Zagreb, Croatia.
With us today are also the Plečnik Awards 2023 recipients. Ana Krič from Mies, as well as Nec Florians, a landscape architect, both received the Plečnik Award for the Timber Kindergarten in Kočevje. Danica Sretenović is a representative from Krater. Matjaž Bolčina from Arepa Studio, recipient of the award Which Primary School Library. Blaž Babnik Romaniuk, representative of the Common in Community book and Slovenian Pavilion at 2021 Venice Architecture Biennial, as well as Sebastian Cvelbar and Leonard Piano, who are both recipients of the Student Prize. Before we start with the question, it would be wise to address the format of the roundtable. Since we're filming the talk, we encourage the members of the public, as well as the recipients, to first introduce themselves, your name and whether you're an architect, landscape architect, or a designer. And we appreciate like a small sentence following. We would like to start with Boštjan, but first I have a very poetic quote. We've been taught that our main goal in life is to do, to produce, and to accomplish. When you begin to poke holes in that theory and begin to say, no, that's wrong, that's not true, that's when the light comes. This is a quote by Trisha Hersey. It was written while she was researching the oppressive systems built on colonialism, capitalism, and white supremacy. So what's the question now? When we are rethinking the process of award giving and trying to establish new parameters, what obstacles did you stumble upon, and what was achieved, and what do you strive to achieve in the following years?
Thank you, Nuša, for this question, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you actually that this is actually the first event which Plečnik Fund is kind of organizing together with another organization, another institution, and I do believe this is a very good kickstart in the sort of bright and fruitful future of the collaboration. To answer your question, it's been a year exactly since we started, let's say, I would call it like remodeling, because it's not just reorganization, but it's really like coming up or trying to come up with a new model of what architecture awarding could be. And having that in mind, it was maybe like the first kind of underlying thought was what is an architecture practice today? Or actually better saying, what are architecture practices today? And how the field of architecture practices could be expanded. And by expanding, I mean also this expansion could be also awarded. And first recognize and then awarded. So this expansion, what architecture practice is, so it's not just building, and it's not just writing, and it's not just dealing with, interior urbanism, landscape, construction, but it's also kind of activism. It's also kind of dealing with different forms, if I use this word, of space or spatial setting which is around us. And, having that in mind was kind of an initiative, kind of like better saying, like strong tendency to move forward and to find a way, that these new architecture practices could be recognized, could be actually acknowledged, and at the end could be actually awarded, And then the award is actually something which sort of connects to the past work, but with a strong tendency and strong looking forward, And I would just say, that the main thing to kind of like showing up, the main thing was actually how to, let's say, define categories of applications to, in that case, Plečnik's award, which would sort of stimulate, let's say, those who would actually feel that they're always outside the field to apply. So first was, you need to kind of get people to apply. You need to kind of get practitioners of different sort of architecture practices to apply. So this is number one. And then, when they're applied, they are in the application pool. And of course, a very good jury. So it's application method. The jury who would actually recognize, the quality, I would even say like the innovativity of that work, And I think, just to conclude, that from my kind of modest point of view, that we actually succeed, with that, with this sort of like very, very sort of simple fact of restructuring the way of applications, we actually, it was achieved, that a new kind of awards were actually presented yesterday.
I have a very short following up question. So the architectural practices are so focused on merely surviving in this economy and time. How do you plan to kickstart so that they see that it's really important to take time to write an application?
Yeah, this is a good question, and this is a very good question because this is something which needs to be taken into account, for the next year, I would say. But I would maybe start to I would actually try to twist this question, and going to the two stipendiums which were awarded yesterday, like for the final work of the university. I do see, that the award as a stipendium, as little as it is, but the award as something, which actually could stimulate an additional contribution, which is then presented, which is then kind of like, this is also one of the, let's say, task of the Plečnik Fund, to kind of like follow-up of what and who have been awarded, to see, how, the awards were actually, where the awards can actually found fruitful ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to switch the team up a bit and also switch the temporal perspective just a little. So instead of going with this year's winners, I'll bring up the first ever Plečnik Award recipient. So the Plečnik Award is awarded yearly, and this year is the 50th anniversary. So the first Plečnik Prize was actually given to the renovation project of the Blade Island by Anton Bittens. Now, Allan, you've been researching in Ljubljana for the Are We Winning project. So that includes a glossary, that's going to include an exhibition to which you're all super kindly invited. It's in June, super close. And you strolled around Ljubljana. I think you've been noticing some things around our city, but also you are a practicing architect, you're also a pedagogue. Which criteria and which values do you recognize first within our built environment, but then also which kind of criteria do you consider perhaps that it's overlooked when maybe awarding it or when considering it?
Thank you for the question. I think it's interesting because it will make quite connection with the previous answer. Well, so as you said it, Are We Winning is kind of, I like the idea of the program as something that is quite long and still a work in progress. But the idea was really what is the price for, and how do we kind of, provide an award to someone, to new practices, but also what are the criteria? Because when we are talking about awarding something, we are talking about a jury, we are talking about a process that says at some point that project is better or that project needs that price more than another one. And Francesca and I, we quite directly started to research about that idea, that what are the kind of new values that can provide or help that prices, and those new prices and those kind of new version of the Plečnik one. It's interesting because you talked about that idea of how the practice of architecture is shifting right now. I think it was one of the first value or the first starting point of our research in terms of value, because we realized that the prices are more and more questioned because the practice is evolving more and more fast. So we were actually questioning ourselves about, okay, how can we showcase or how can we present those kind of new values, new environment of practicing architecture in the frame of the Are We Winning thing? And so basically that was the idea of the connection and how we find a connection between what we were thinking about, all the questions that Are We Winning provide, and the kind of new improvement or new shifting that we have seen and that we have discussed with the Plečnik one. And jumping quite quickly to the environment of Ljubljana. So, like, as you said it, I'm a stranger here, less and less now, but I discovered Ljubljana since last year, and what was interesting, beside that kind of research of the new values and how those kind of new quality or new idea of quality in architecture was connected to the idea of Plečnik and all of the history of the Plečnik Award Fund. And so we made 1 week of workshop here last month, And that was super interesting because we took the time to discover a little bit more Ljubljana and how those kind of, how the kind of little moment of urbanity was interesting for us about that idea of the values that we wanted to enhance, and maybe that quality that we wanted for the prices were not inside and were not located in big environment or kind of grandiloquent, as we say in French, architecture, but maybe in some kind of details or some kind of really moments or happenings that were everywhere in the city. So what was the challenge for us after realizing that kind of idea and that kind of beauty of the everyday, how can we permit to enhance or to showcase or to help that those kind of also not so much loud architecture to be winning a prize, and how can we also as a collective win from all that kind of process that is gigantic to provide a prize for few, for lucky few, and so how we can connect it to that idea of common and what we have everywhere, every day. That's it. Sorry for the long response. You say short sentence.
No, that's quite all right. And I think that, I mean, what you brought up, I think is quite like starkly reflected in this year's prizes. I think that the moment that we got the off-the-record insiders edition of who this year's prize recipients were, it was really encouraging to hear that projects. I mean, of course, there are new builds, and new builds should still be built whenever there is a need for them, as in the case of this year's medal winner, the kindergarten. But the rest of the projects really considered the already built and considered also the value of the unbuilt. And if anyone of the winners would like to jump in at any point, should I remind you, you are super welcome to do so. Though there's questions coming after. But Nuša, if you'd like to take the word.
And perhaps now from an emerging voice to a very established voice, Ivan. Architecture awards in many ways define what architecture is. However, they mostly highlight one output of architecture practice, which is built environment. With your work with the Mies van der Rohe Foundation, you're involved in processes of one of the most influential awards in our practice. By selecting new criteria that Allan mentioned, we can highlight architectural theory, practice, built environment that can contribute to social equity, visibility, inclusivity, preservation of an unbuilt environment, and the balancing act of building a new and adaptive reuse. So you may be wondering now what the question is. Can we discuss inclusivity a bit more? What are your thoughts on this? How do you aim to achieve this with your work with Foundation? Thank you,
Nuša, and I think it's really interesting and important that we're here meeting to discuss on the award. So that's the first thing that, as Allan was saying, there's a shift in architecture, but I think that the shift in architecture is constant. Over the centuries, architecture has not been understood in the same way. And now, because the speed of change and so on, and the context is also faster, it is also kind of changing. So we have to adapt, and there are certain ways of awarding, understanding, judging, discussing about architecture that also need to be updated. And I'll answer immediately, when the EU Mies Awards was started, it was after the Plečnik Awards, there was a very different socio-geopolitical situation in Europe. So knowing what was going on in Berlin for somebody in Toulouse or in London or whatever was very different from how we can get the information. So the aim was very clear. We want to discuss more and to know more on the processes and the results after all these processes in different parts of the European territories, to kind of share all these experiences. then things have been evolving. Now communication and being aware of many things is kind of easier, but what we need still is much more to curate that understanding or that knowledge, no? To discuss more on what all this information that we have means and how we can kind of take it to our advantage to improve the quality of our environment. So something that is as important as the previous process and the moment of the award-winning celebrations and so on is all the process that takes place afterwards to discuss on those results. As for, you were telling me about, or you were asking about integration, no? How people are involved or involvement. There's something that comes up constantly. If in this case, in the Mies Awards, there should be categories for sustainable buildings, no? For those that have had better processes in kind of integrating people in the processes before, during, and then see how that takes over, how people take over in the buildings, and so on. And something that, well, because of how architecture is communicated and probably also what prizes have been speaking about during all these years, is that sometimes it seems like something that is only kind of strong right now and that we're only speaking about it right now. But it's something that has been kind of happening for years. It's kind of not just a topic of today, but maybe it was not kind of shown, explained, or we were not that much aware about. So from my point of view, what I would say now that we're at the beginning and then we start also with the conversations or discussions is that as much as we have to speak about all kinds of sustainability, the economic, the social, the ecological sustainability, we have to also support the processes, understand them, and then see what the prize is about. In the case of the Mies Awards, it's given to something which has been built. And when it has been built, what's also important that the jury takes into consideration, and then here we need to see how we explain it so that the jury understands it, is the importance that the process has had in terms of kind of participation, in terms of research as well, and in terms of, well, let's say a certain result. And then also, sometimes prizes, we don't have that critical distance to see and how the project has evolved. So sometimes it's interesting to go back and see what has happened with many of these places 15 years afterwards and so on. But normally we have 2-3 years maximum. And that is as important because there we also highlight not only, it's true that when we give a project an award or so on, we see a result. But then what's important is to kind of also discover everything that's behind it, and not only the winners, but also if there's finalists or shortlists. What I mean is that right now, at the same exact moment as we're speaking here in Barcelona, there's a construction fair called Construmat, and there's two of the winners and finalists. One of them, you had them here yesterday, no, La Col, and the other ones are Peristoral. And in Barcelona, they're speaking in this construction fair. We have invited them because they were part of the finalists and the winners, and they are speaking about their research with compact rammed earth and kind of well, ways in which they work in order to kind of finally end up also making buildings, constructing buildings like the ones that they did, no? Where they had been researching for a very long time with wood, with changing policies and so on. So also saying that that is an excuse, that winning a awarded project, to speak about many things, and that we constantly continue with the conversation with those peoples and everybody else, the industry and all those kind of other people that are involved in all these processes.
I really love that you brought up the question of maybe proceeding from the very small scale attempts at thinking about sustainability, but scaling things up and really approaching industry and making things more mainstream. I wanted to maybe ask any one of the people sitting here, so practicing architects potentially, but do you feel that there's an opportunity to do this in Slovenia, to consider taking what the Plečnik Award can give you, the position that the award brings, and taking it to, I don't know, whoever you discuss, be it investors, be it construction companies, potentially, I don't know, decision makers on a national level, and using this as a way to attempt things that maybe you haven't had the chance to implement.
Who will open the debate?
Please take them.
My name is Jure. I'm a Hrvat. I'm from Sveto Mies, the office. We were awarded yesterday for the Timber Kindergarten. And what I was already saying yesterday at the ceremony, that our experiences, especially following this couple of, like a series of these lectures on building with wood, is the experience that in Slovenia we're not really that far along in terms of technology and building. So I would say that it should be a sort of a platform that would allow architects with such an award and having experience with this building to convey this and maybe I don't know, like help develop this sector, for instance, in terms of wood. But not only that, I think it's also important the project with the school library. It's also showing how things can change in terms of, let's say, next steps. That these are important projects when dealing with either new materiality or with new content or new, let's say, interventions into existing buildings. I think it is a platform. I don't know how effective it will be. It's, after all, our first award, so we'll see how much we can get out of it, let's say, in terms of influence on the in the broader scale, let's say, of the construction industry. It probably, let's say, the ceremony yesterday maybe hosted mostly architects and people from the same field, so it was not really the greatest of platforms for spreading this. But I imagine that with, let's say, a growing, not really popularity, but more a growing, say, importance of the award, then obviously the influence can then be used to change things. That's, have something to add.
It's good that you mentioned a very small library. Matevž, I have a question for you. Together with your colleagues, you won an award for a very small and unexpected library at the Vič Primary School, where you did something really surprisingly small, yet something grand for the students as well as the community. Were you surprised that the collective body of jurors recognized this grand gesture?
Of course we were surprised, and I would like to thank Hana because she was the one that encouraged me to apply the project for the Plečnik Award. So you were the one? Yes, she was the one that encouraged me, because I said to her, this project is too small to be given an award. You know? But then I've read this new organization of the Plečnik Fund, and I found out that there is this new structure, and that we have a chance not to win an award, but at least to be seen and to make a statement or to show what we have done in these projects. But otherwise, as a practicing architect, I think we always forget the words, forget the statements, and forget about being, I think, involved in these actions, or in you know, being in part of the action in the society. We just practice in our field, and I think our field is reflecting everything. It's evolving in our environment and society. So every good project has inherited everything from the surrounding. So our project was maybe is more interesting today because it has all these topics inside. We built in an existing environment. We did a small project that has a big impact in the school, also on the finance of the school, because we built inside the school, not a new library beside the school. And it works well, but to do a good architectural project, I think, I firmly believe, you have to forget every of those topics. On the other hand, I think it's important to have this structure of the word, because there are fields in architecture that do not concentrate mainly on buildings, like Krater or others. So they are more active visibly active in society. No? So I think this new structure is really important to give way and space to those architects or to those practicing specialists that do not just do buildings as we do. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I would say this also, that it's maybe even more important in terms of receiving recognition for what you're doing for the clients. A lot of the times, practicing in, let's say, architecture or small interventions in schools, you might feel a bit like you're the crazy person that's trying to push for some ideas that are not widely accepted. So I would imagine that receiving a prize of this magnitude would then show also to the, let's say, the clients that are sometimes might be frightened of attempting such architectures or such endeavors, that, well, maybe I'm not the person that needs to decide whether something is good, but if, let's say, a jury of experts found something to be of high quality, that means that maybe I should trust these guys on doing such things. So I think from that point, it's maybe even more important.
And I imagine not only for that particular team that did something good, but for example, a technique that was used, that was awarded, I think it can have a ripple effect throughout the industry, hopefully.
Exactly.
for people to consider that, yes, these small things are like kind of cool now. I think that culture in general and also awards in general are sort of like the stamp of coolness and the stamp of approval. So I think that something for something to be desired, I think is also like one of the driving mechanisms of, you know, faster acquisition or appropriation by clients, obviously. Thanks. Yeah. Of course.
Sure, please.
Yeah. Okay, because I was thinking about something. When I finished studying architecture, I started working with several architecture offices, and then I had my own studio with 2 partners, and we had a lot of work developing or participating in competitions and then fighting or dealing with regulations and finally ending up kind of being able to kind of develop a project, taking it forward and so on. So in many cases, we totally forgot about participating in competitions or awards or so on. And then when they invited us to participate in a conversation or so on, it was really kind of nice. So there's a certain point in which practicing, let's say, architects also kind of have to find a way to communicate what they're doing, because that helps in your studios and so on. But at the same time, I think that it's also our role as institutions to support in this for further debate or discussions or even participation in the competitions. What I mean is that, or in prizes, not competition, prizes. What I mean is that in the Mies Awards, for example, architects do not participate themselves. What we have is this different ways of having people participate in the prizes, which means that there's the architecture associations. There is also a group of experts all over the territory. And then we have a committee. And these people that are on site, they are the ones that we ask them to visit, to know about those works, and to propose those ones that they consider should participate. No? So there's already like a first jury, a first judging. And then we contact the architects. And some of them would have never thought about participating. Most of them, I mean, they have their communication teams and so on, so they're always kind of knocking on the door, some of them, but not everybody has that possibility. And many of them are surprised. Some cannot even send in the documents because that has a cost. Even, the Mies Awards, it's free. I mean, it's not that it's free to participate, let's say, but obviously it has a cost to develop everything, but nobody participates by paying. But some people cannot send the documentation. So then we find other ways and so on so that the jury can see everything. And then the other part is that once the jury has this kind of overview of everything, to create the platforms, the opportunities to discuss on issues that have to do with a certain way of proceeding or the processes or on materials, and to find the right places, the good or the interesting places that they could be connected to architecture, but they can be also construction fairs or policy decisions. So I think that yesterday there were many architects, or most of us were architects, but there were also politicians, And I think that those people there, that's important that they're there because those are policy makers, those are decision makers and so on. And they should be also kind of pushed to understand what I understood, because they translated it to me, about this issue with wood in Slovenia and where it comes from, but where it finally is kind of transformed and so on. And from there, maybe there can be kind of other meetings or ways to discuss with these peoples as well as in the industry and so on.
From what I understood also from the discussion, I was quite interested because all of the earnings that we talk about, the prices, are quite indirect. It's you win the prize and then you have that kind of legitimacy or that kind of stamp that we're talking about. And maybe what I wanted to ask everyone, maybe the institutions, maybe also the winners, how can we make those earnings of the prize more kind of direct? Because that's a question of me. Like when you decided to apply, what did you want it? What did you want it to for the prize? Like maybe if we win, what is going to happen? And maybe, of course, the aim was that legitimacy, but maybe there is some goals that are more quite direct, and that's what you started to talk about with Mies, how you can produce a kind of process to also give platform to people, or how that kind of institution or that kind of tool of the prize helped you directly to win those goals, and not in an indirect way as you are in the newspaper or the client understand that the project is not totally bullshit because there is that stamp of expert, but maybe there is a kind of direct goal. So I wanted to maybe put that on the table. How we can make that tool more efficient on the idea that the prices give you something, or the prices help you to earn something. I don't know.
And this also applies, I think, to all the categories. So not only the build, but also for the research.
Perhaps Blaž, go ahead, yeah.
For us, the award and also the application wasn't, in a sense, focused on what we did as a project. It was very much about the legitimacy of the project. And not only the awards such as Plečnik Award, which is high ranking, already the fact that we were chosen to do the project by an architectural competition meant a lot. When we did the research, when we visited these architectures that are not recognized as really good or perfect, when we mentioned that this was chosen by a competition and we are financed by the ministry, by the state, it already gave some legitimacy to the project and opened the door, and we were taken more seriously what we did. Because the whole project is dealing with buildings that were built in socialism. They're really not, they were built quickly. Most of them are quite anonymous, but they have really high crucial cultural and social value in Slovenia. So now by winning Plečnik's award, it's exactly the legitimacy of not so much our work, but the whole project of these cultural centers, and that they should be protected, that the public should know about them. Is the award is a stepping stone to even improve what we could do with the project, or not us, but even those who will prolong it. So in this sense, I believe the architectural awards are quite crucial. And I would make 2 points here. One is that architectural awards are part of the, let's say, universum of exhibitions, of critics, of even architectural competitions. So there are processes that define what our profession is. And I think in this time when we got a lot of new architectural awards, and the line between awards and PR, it's getting a bit, I think, a bit blurred. Even the journalistic part or the publications, it's hard to distinguish between PR articles and proper critiques. So I believe that role of awards being critical, having a really clear stand on what they are doing, what they're trying to achieve, is even more crucial today than before. In this sense, the categories, I believe, they are really important, crucial, and I think each year should be reevaluated. Because let's say there's a known discussion about categories in, let's say, Grammy Awards, because they're sometimes used as a tool to disenfranchise certain, let's say, artists. You know, you have urban music, and then everything is pushed in that category, which is not pop, and it's a whole discussion. But I think it could show that the same issue could arise in architecture. You know, have certain categories, they repeat each year, and the projects that don't fit the canon of what is good architecture, build the nice one, gets pushed into certain categories. So I think each year the process of giving of awards is like starting anew. It should be a bit of a radical process, a creative process, really involving interdisciplinary juries, and seen as really a creative process that can define what our profession is.
Danica, maybe I wanted to bring that same question back to you. I think knowing painfully well the world of NGOs and the way that financing works, for example, and the way that these awards might then, I think that sometimes, like for a practicing architect, this can mean a good thing, but for NGOs who deal with advocacy, who deal with themes that might not be easily categorized, I guess, into, you know, very obvious European financing frameworks, I think that maybe national recognition brings something else. But at the same time, what else would you be willing or wanting to hear from an award on a national level?
Yeah, it's funny actually that after a series of international awards or recognitions, this is the first national award for Krater. It's a practice much easier recognized internationally than locally, and appreciated also. When we decided to apply, it was really hard to fit into the categories. So only afterwards we start thinking, okay, what about Krater as a public space actually? And it's good that public space definition is so open that Krater also could fit into it. In a sense, I think it's really good for architecture that Krater got an award, so that architecture thinks that Krater is an object of architecture or the project of architecture. For the collective itself, or for this place, we also, like, subtitle was the feral feral typology. So there is no such thing as feral typology in the cities right now, and we recognized during our direct engagement with the site and also theoretical work, and also work in advocacy, that there is something new to be defined in this site, and that we need to fight on different levels, in a cultural level, in a policy level, like a whole web of, we need to invite also the structure in which we need to advocate what we are doing and what the site is actually. And in this sense, I think the prize gives visibility to this fight, because also the public space is not a given, and there was an enormous amount of work did by many, many people. All of them are listed at the exhibition in order to make this a public space. And also an enormous amount of work to raise the public debate or advocate crater in media to change this media picture of how the space was presented before. And also, if you are speaking about accessibility, that we imagine that the public space is accessible always for people. This space was always accessible for all the seeds, trees, I mean, for all not people species. It's always accessible. And it was maybe good that it was not always accessible by the people. So in this sense, I think the project changes all the relations on how we think about public and who is actually public. And the award give me also the space now to speak about it, because actually in our educational system, in our maybe also curatorial system for now, we don't have space to speak about this and to think how to conceptualize this. We were very happy actually that when you're trying to make an institute from a construction site, it's really hard to fit into categories, you know. But we were very happy that the jury has this courage to pronounce, and I think this is also a strong political statement, that the pending, what is pending construction site, that it is actually a public space, so that we can ask further what else is public space that we are not seeing at the moment. So yeah, this for now.
Thank you, Danica. And I would like to start the process of perhaps thinking together, rethinking together. You also received the Prešeren Prize, you received the New European Bauhaus Prize. Could we be slightly critical and ask ourselves, what do you wish that the awards would do for you, this past and this one, but then they didn't?
It's a really hard question. I mean, and we also need to discuss this together. We were shortlisted for the Bauhaus, not awarded by Bauhaus. Yeah. I think that, okay. I was thinking what this radical gesture that Crater got an award could do for the future of the award. I don't think it's a replication of Crater practice. It shouldn't be another Crater for the next year. But maybe it should be really seriously taken that Crater needs systematical support, which we don't have at the moment, because it's such an interdisciplinary practice and it was not actually established before. I don't know any practice where the ecologists, the craftsmen, artists worked in Slovenia together in a construction site on such a different scale of the projects, like we're doing from the experiment with materials to whole competitions and everything that we did in the last year. So in this sense, I think it needs some invention of how to be systematically supported and engage more professionals into it. It's very important. It's not just activism. It's our professional work. And we are redefining our practices within it, and by relating to the knowledge of each of us that are there. So you're redefining your own practice. In this sense, I think we all need to reinvent the way how for this practice not to be extinct, because if there is no next project, this practice will be like extincted. Yeah.
I would perhaps take this moment to address a more sensitive topic of disappointment that might follow when you receive the award and then you anticipate something and then this something doesn't happen. Would someone be brave enough to address this? Please.
Okay. Disappointment. It can be very personal, but then we're speaking about ego, no? And winning, and then this is what I can get in the future, whatever. But if we speak or we understand it more as a community, what this, for example, can kind of bring to people that are working maybe in similar ways or so on, that they can apply to the prize, because the prize and the jury members are going to look exactly in a very similar way or with the same kind of deepness to any kind of project that participates, one that has to do more with certain top aspects or the other. It already kind of helps in changing also what the prize or what the juries in the future will be seeing, and that's what will be kind of also changing prizes. In the EU Mies Awards, we had very little collective housing until the year that Stephen Bates was the president, and that year collective housing, the EU people were kind of startled about it because we had all these kind of big collective cultural buildings and so on. And then the following year, most of the nominations had to do with collective housing. No, it was not that had to be the topic or only, but people, I mean, it gives a certain visibility or understanding of what a prize can be and what a jury can award.
Well, on the topic of juries, I'd like to give the word to Mateja Kurir, who is the manager of the platform, but also an ex-jury member and also an ex-Plečnik Award recipient and also a philosopher. So maybe use all of that in this one question. No, just kidding. But I wanted to maybe bring attention to the multidisciplinarity that we've addressed already several times today. So either in the sense of your collective, Blaž, or Krater's collective, who also has like a very, very wide spectrum of people who are involved in it. How can we make all of this happen in just 5 people? Or should it just be 5 people? There's so many criteria that you have to take into account. And as Ivan said, picking the jury actually means picking the prize, right? So there is kind of a secret curriculum that can be implemented by those in power. How did you see your experience in both of these opportunities, and what might we learn from this year's awards?
Yes, thank you for the question, and good evening, everyone. So I was first a jury member, and then I was a recipient 2 years after that. And when I was a jury member in 2020, it was the COVID times. So I was the only one being a non-architect out of 5. So it was me and 4 architects going around Slovenia. We have quite an intensive time and a very good time and a lot of discussions. A lot of critical discussion with people, but I found out after the first tour we had that actually we are looking at completely different stuff. We went to a building, we saw it, and then we sit in a cafe, and they were talking, oh, less the plan, the facade, that things that I really don't look into in a building. So it was an intensive time. And I think it is great that there is at least one non-architect in the jury. But what I would maybe prefer is to have more non-architects in a jury, as the users of the buildings are usually non-architects. And as we see today, we are discussing actually how the architectural discourse, or what is, let's say, in fashion in architecture currently in times. But mainly this is a discussion between architects, while architecture for me is in many ways social art, so an art that actually defines how a society also works, moves, and so on. So I think it's very good to have a broad discussion. Also, so last year I also got a call of a colleague, which was also part of the Plečnik jury, also a non-architect, and she was just, how did you deal with this? It's so strange actually to be part of it in these discussions, because as an architect you really look at completely different things. And we were talking on the phone for half an hour discussing that yes, it would be really good to open the discussion a bit broadly also to the people outside the field. And of course, as a philosopher, I always feel a bit out of the field between you, between the architects as well. But we have been now I think for 5 or 6 days together from the Biennale, and now going yesterday to the opening and now today. So there is a huge community of architects you really like to meet, you really like to discuss, and this is amazing. And in many ways, the public, so the users, is sometimes left out. And I think the gesture of awarding a practice should be as inclusive as possible. So the jury should be as mixed as it can be. And also, this diversity of a jury could also bring maybe an insight of the universality. As an award is given, usually actually the spirit of a time is captured. So with this, if you have a multidisciplinary approach, then this spirit could be a bit broader. You cannot just pick a building and then say, yeah, this building is beautiful, it has all these values, which is an added value. And when we are talking about added values, we are very, very close to neoliberalism and all that, and yeah, successful, beautiful, and amazing. But maybe with a jury, which is multidisciplinary, you can then bring in this question of universalism. So where we are going, why is this architecture a good one? And also a very important thing, I think, with a jury, and also being a part of the jury, and also being a part of someone who is recipient of an architectural award, there also comes responsibility. So as a jury member, you have to be really decided, yes, this one is the one we have to pick, not the other ones. And if you are a recipient, actually you are a showcase, way or the other. Your work is a showcase for the whole society. And people will look up at you, and you will be part of the mainstreaming of discourse. So yes, I would certainly go for multidisciplinary juries.
Yeah, the jury is very important.
So, Alyosha Tekleva, the president of this year's jury, we're taping this just so everyone's on board.
Okay, thanks. And I would just like add briefly that besides diversity in disciplines, we were also thinking in having a jury member who is from abroad. We are, after all, a very small country, and it also means we are a very small community within architects, but even if you kind of extend beyond the architects, it's still a small community. So that's something that maybe in this jury we were missing. In some juries, other words, and maybe previous years, there was an element. So I'd just like to take this opportunity and to give an open invitation to Ivan for the next year to be in the jury.
But I would like to, Mateja mentioned, I'm quoting you, a successful practice, and I would like to follow up. It's a question for everybody. What really is success in architecture right now?
So if we talk about design juries, as noble as we want the content to be within a design studio, still when we bring in a design jury, it's very much ego-oriented, object-oriented firing squad, and not a diverse mix of discutants that is later reflected in award juries and so on. So it's very much about who we bring into the discourse and what we value. So if we educate for newness, and if we educate for beautiful objects and not processes or meanings or programs and so on, it's kind of difficult to break the habit when valuing architectural awards. And this also comes to, several times here it was mentioned, and I was making notes, the notion of expanded practice and what architectural practice today is. And we just finished a project that we were involved in with our school, led by the RCA for 3 years. It was an Erasmus project called Architecture's Afterlife, which discovered that 38% of architectural graduates today do not practice architecture in the narrow sense of the word of being building architects. Yet, only 7% of them have completely disengaged with spatial practice in a broader sense, so gone into other disciplines such as filmmaking or journalism or so on. Well, they still use a special architectural way of thinking, but that's another topic. But what is with these in-betweens? Because at first we would categorize them as non-building architects, as architectural graduates falling out of practice, but in fact they are practicing. They're just practicing different ways of dealing with space, different ways of reframing, different ways of engaging, which very often involves also spatial collectives or dealing with space within a diverse or interdisciplinary group of people. So this really has to reflect back into education. And in that sense, I think that architectural awards, while a long time ago they used to mean, like Ivan mentioned, a way of knowing what other people were doing, like world exhibitions and so on. And now they are a way of stating what is important or sending a message. For instance, the first time that a major European architectural award was given to a retrofitted building rather than something new was a very strong message that then leaves these ripples in the public. And it is not so much a question of what it means for an individual or a practice, because individually practicing is inextricably related to the ego. It's very difficult to differentiate this. Whether it brings new jobs and so on, maybe it's completely beyond the point. But it really does mean or bring importance in what the architectural discourse in the following period will be, or what messages these awards send. For instance, like Danica mentioned, public space. Who is the public if we are evaluating public space that we're dealing for? If we evaluate a process and a project that defines public space as multi-species public space, and somebody reads about this and it is talked about, then the way that we approach the built environment or the nature-culture relationship changes radically. So it's very much about the messages that we send and the value systems that we teach, both in education and within the didactic element that the awards have, than perhaps the individual meaning of an award.
I realize, or I think there is still a paradox when we're talking about the prices, because we're talking about it as a collective tool from the beginning of the discussion, and that was really what you were talking about. But how the prices work now, it's directly something that is quite individual. It's something because you apply alone. It's something that because you apply for something, you apply for something that is quite connected to the individual, to the ego. And then after we say, after the price is done, we say it's a collective tool for everyone to kind of show that shift in practices. But maybe if we really understand it as something that is quite common or something that is quite to use and not something that is individual, maybe the system of the price is quite disconnected with that goal. And that's something that I found quite interesting because, yeah, of course we want this to be helpful for everyone at this table, but at the end or at the beginning, it's something that starts from like one person. So I don't know how we can make the move.
But is this wrong? No. And I'm just kind of like saying, that the discussion is going, I think, in a very interesting direction. But I think that, and I completely agree with you, and also will kind of grasp on what Danica has previously mentioned. You know, if the question is what is the value, what is the meaning of the awards, you know. So saying, you know, if you start with something which is individual, you know, and then this sort of rises up and becomes, if I exaggerate, a common good, you know, a way or a kind of a light for the, let's say, evolution of architectural practices, I would question what is wrong with that.
No,
you know?
I think, like really, like
I mean, I'm kind of provoking you.
No, yeah, but I totally understand, and that's really also an interrogation that is quite personal, definitely. That kind of relationship that you can have with the price when you are, like, when you are young, when you want them, but also you are like, maybe they're a problem. I think there is nothing wrong with that idea of the individual becoming the common, kind of common good. I think everything of those problems that we are evoking about the price, or those challenges that the price have, it's a lot about representation, how we say the price is and how we define the price. I think, no, it's something that is individual and then a collective tool. We just need to say it, or to clearly explain it to people, to the public, to the architect, to the young people that want to apply, and not something that is always abstract or insidious at the end. I have that accomplishment that is mine and that is personal and that's super important for the person that received that prize, but how we can make it more clear, that relation with individual and collective as architect. And I think there are plenty of ways, and that roundtable is one of them, but we need maybe to clearly state it to make the price evolve a little bit. I don't think we should get rid of the price or get rid of that individuality, because that individuality is super interesting and super important, because at the moment you win a prize, there is a shift on how people see the project, as we said it, but also how you see your practice. And that's something that's quite important, because that legitimacy comes from the public, but also from yourself when you are receiving it. And that's something that is completely important when you are researching about that price identity, that price idea. But there is, more connection between the collective, the public, that can be worked on. I don't come with like direct answers, I know, and I'm pretty aware about this, but there is something.
I completely agree about the notion of the personal meaning of a prize. And of course it means something and it brings legitimacy to a practice and so on. I didn't mean to say that it doesn't, but the way that it carries for architecture in general has a very strong message. So when we have prizes that have excellent projects shortlisted, it will be, maybe in architectural terms, they will be equally good, but one of them will convey a message for the future that this prize can embody and give legitimacy to something that maybe before wouldn't be considered for a prize. And I think it's really important to move away from kind of the binary definitions. I was recently at a roundtable where there was whether architectural education should even ever include building new projects or only dealing with existing. And it's a very binary discussion, because in any case you're using your architectural knowledge and tools and so on. That doesn't diminish it. A calling for a more careful engagement with the environment or with a broad definition of public does not at the same time mean that architecture stops being architecture. So there's just giving a voice to all of these nuances in between, both in engaging with the environment, but also with defining practice. And giving an award for all of these different nuances, maybe.
I think it's very interesting what you're saying about how the notion of the prizes changed, that this message really became important. And if we are looking back how prizes evolved and started in the 20th century, they were meant to support modernization and to award the projects that were really creating more well-being, and then later it turned into awarding projects that were bringing more commodity out and being also, let's say, really products that were supporting, I don't know, branding or even being successful in a way that they were creating identity not only for communities but also for companies or and then we discovered how sustainability is important, but in a very superficial way. But now I think we are at the point also looking at the projects here that we realized how important the transformative power of these projects is. And that we are more thinking about, and we are talking about a lot of their reach and impact in the society. And it can be a project that has a small physical presence like Crater, but it is more important what is behind. There are other criteria that's important. I think that's a very important change or the transformation of the prizes that happened.
Maybe just a short point, I would kind of, take on what you said before, that what was the, let's say, the effect of the award, like, when you awarded, when the Mies was awarded to a social housing, and then, social housing kind of became a topic which actually became a topic of many architectural practices, not just building construction, but also, debate and discussions, and also education in the school, So there is a sort of like an effect of an award, one could not even speculate about that, So it becomes kind of really as a by effect, or also kind of like builds as a by identity, post-identity. So in that sense, I'm really thinking, how, if the application form, the juries, the selection process could become really projective, could actually, be, the guideline of what is going to be, the topic in let's say, in years to come, So in that way, that I'm referring back to this kind of common good, So in that way, I think, that the awards are actually something which are really beneficial for the, let's say, evolution of architecture as a discipline.
I can add one thing there, and that I think is interesting to discuss, which has to do with transparency. So sometimes the jury, at the very beginning, once it has been settled, they discuss on topics that they might agree upon, or at least aims that they will want to discuss during their process and so on. But something that we started doing like 3 editions ago was also filming parts of the jury discussions. So that also makes it a little bit more uncomfortable for the jury at some point, so we don't kind of record everything. They have to be free. And then some of the most important conversations come at dinner time, because these things, I don't know how you do it here, but we have 3 days and it's kind of having lunch, breakfast, supper, everything together. No, but to record parts of it and then to edit it, I mean, to choose those interesting parts that we can then share with everybody to understand, like it can be a 1-minute thing for Instagram, or it can be, then we also produce a short documentary or a video, a 30-minute video, and then smaller videos. So there you start seeing like the voices of the different people that have been involved, those of the projects themselves and those of the ones that have been judging them. And that is kind of very attractive in the different ways in which afterwards you communicate those results, be it exhibitions, publications, conversations like these, or sharing it with LINA. And so I think that that helps, no? Because there you see what the jury was aiming at, or the discussions that themselves were having, and so what was important for them.
I just Googled when Assemble received Turner Prize, and I think it was in 2015. I think that was the first radical shift that happened in a very classical award. And then I'm thinking, because at the beginning I think we were talking a lot about awarding for doing something, and Lacaton Vasal, for example, especially with Mies Award, talk a lot about doing nothing, with leaving Park of Leon Aukok completely as it is, or just basically inventing the mechanisms how to protect this part for that community. So basically they were, the important thing with that project was that the client actually paid for them to not do anything. So they basically supported the passivity which was built through the argument that they've created. So basically that the space is okay as it is, it just needs to be maintained in a certain way. So instead of actually building something, they delivered some sort of, maintenance protocol. So when this is paid for, this means it is also recognized. Contractual, it was done. It is, as if they would, add a bench. And I found it interesting that, a lot of times we were mentioning the word courage. The juries, had the courage to award this small project with a grand idea. No? So we are in 2023, and I think that this movement of shifting practice that is constantly expanding is happening for quite some time already. But maybe it just came to Slovenia a bit late. But nevertheless, it happened. And I think it's important to, let's say, not reflect merely on and I'm going to use Ponti's quote here, not the work of art, but the world according to that work. And I think we need to also discuss the world according to these awards. What kind of world are we actually promoting? What kind of world we want to talk about? In what kind of world we want to live in? And I think that this is the message of architectural production. So in terms of Plečnik Awards, of course, we're looking at details, we're looking at excellency of the work itself. But this year's, I think we're also looking the echo of that work in the community, especially with your projects, I think with all of them. So I think this could be maybe a next point to debate for all of us. I would like to. Also, yes.
I would also like to expand this debate into the field of landscape architecture. Here tonight we also have Nate Florians as well as Zaš Bregar.
So hello, my name is Zaš Bregar. I work at Landezin, and we have Lila Landezin International Landscape Award, which is a kind of an international award. And there were so many subjects already being talked about, so maybe if you can specify what you want me, like the juries or the kind of the main why are we doing it, or the critique, or the most problematic. Oh yes, it's quite a lot of misunderstandings, also with participants especially in the terms of, because, for example, landscape is a lot more process-based, even though architecture can be also process-based, but landscape is even more. So already this is one big problem, that often landscape is presented as an image and doesn't have to do a lot with processes, so it doesn't show processes, and this is one thing that we find really problematic lately. And a lot of times people were asking why we selected some. We also have jury, so just to say, we started this award like 8 years ago, and out of necessity we thought that, of course, images started to dominate also landscape architecture. And that there was a lot of misunderstanding in what does it mean to have interesting or good landscape architecture, what does that mean, and out from that we started this award. And now, contrary to other, let's say, awards, I hope so, where things are getting a lot more technical due to the environmental and social distress that there is. Everything is getting much more scientific. We try to embed this criteria that is environmental, social, whatever. We take it to a point to get, for example, short list or a long list of projects sometimes, and then we stop talking about criteria, and then we try to find some kind of voice, some kind of identity. And it's a kind of a contrary, because there was a lot of discussion like 10 years ago, less ego in architecture, in design, in landscape architecture. And all the offices before, there was like a first name and the last name, and then they all shifted to some kind of Lola or Lela or kind of abbreviations. So the kind of this individual that was head of the office was kind of censored in a way. So it was kind of technical, and now we try to bring back a little more this personal approach, and in a way, which sounds really strange, we want to say a little bit more ego sometimes, just to say that it's not all technical. So these are the kind of misunderstandings also, that people don't understand that sometimes, and sometimes we give a word to a project that is really presented with ugly images, and then they say why, and we read the text, and they okay, then it's okay. So a lot of this kind of misunderstandings that are quite, unfortunately, very there in the sphere of landscape architecture and architecture.
Let me just add one thing, because, sorry, a very short thing, I'll try. What you were saying about images, it's true that now in many prizes, the results, you see the images and you would say, why has that won that, or what's behind it? So each time it's more important to understand the processes or certain aspects of that work that are not visible in image, in a moment in which the image dominates absolutely everything. So you try to put Instagram certain images of certain works and so on, and you get 2 or 3 likes, and then there's other projects that had 1,000 likes, and there's no kind of interest in terms of kind of what they are achieving. And there's something that we also find many times, is that as architects, we're not good at everything, obviously, and we are very aware about that. And writing, explaining the work is something that is still very difficult. And we find texts which are very, very weak, to say the least. And so that's why we have the nominators who we ask to write short lines, a paragraph, to explain why they consider that one should participate, so that we also have then the explanation by the architect. And then something that we were speaking about yesterday, we were helping a company there in Barcelona to create their prize, but including the video. So sometimes through video, through kind of words and ways of explaining the life within those places, it helps in explaining those projects to the jury, but then afterwards also to everybody else, to understand a little bit more why a jury has chosen your works, for example. No? That maybe if we were 20 years ago, the image would not be as impacting as many airport images or so on, images that we had.
Boštjan?
May I just touch another topic, which is the hyperinflation of the awards, architecture awards. And I mean, you're just going to start to address that. You know, we have like so many awards today, you know, which are kind of like, if I exaggerate, which should be banned. You know, like where you need to pay to apply, and then of course you think like you know, all this. I don't want to mention anyone, you know, but like I'm sure that we all know what I'm talking about. Like from the magazine to online magazines. But what is the most bizarre, you know, these are the awards of, you know, when you see the categories. So you have like 175 categories, you know, like one family house with 1 window, and then 3 stories family house with 6 windows. You know. But what is the most bizarre, that this actually you know, when you ask again, what is the effect of these awards, of this kind of awards, which are not like discourse, debate, you know, everything what we've been discussing about.
But they have like a really strong PR machine.
And this is actually, this is what Hana just kind of taking words, you know. It's really, then it becomes really bizarre. It's really bizarre, The most bizarre point was, when you apply, you got an award, and then you need to pay for that award that you can actually publish, or make it publicly known.
I think, sorry, maybe I will start to be a little bit technical and boring on this point, but yeah, the hyperinflation, like in 2021, there was a research counting the numbers of awards in the world in architecture. It's 426, and since then, since 2 years, they are maybe 25% more. I think that hyperinflation is quite pragmatic, and yeah, to be direct, is because there is quite good economy of the price. The price is something that is quite lucrative. That is something that is quite obscene to talk about, because when we're talking about prices, we're talking about quality and excellence of architecture, but also the other side is that we're talking also about organization that are, yeah, directly connected to financial ideas or financial problematics. So, like that's one of the reasons of that kind of hyperinflation. And when you are talking about economy, of course, the people that pays wants their money back. So you start to have those little categories, because if you have more categories, you start to have more winners. So the winners that pays have the more chances to win. So basically, that's kind of circle that started since 10 to 15 years ago about that idea of the price, and is quite linked to that idea of architecture as a communication tool, and that hyperinflation of the image. It's that kind of same chronology that we have witnessed. And I think there is, so from that part, there is kind of, a bizarre atmosphere, a bizarre context of the prices, because it's quite directly linked to that blurry goal of the price. We don't really know what is it for, because there are also many different, and because they are blurry in their communication, and because you don't really know what is the price for, or who gives the price, you have that kind of weirdness of is that price is that good, or is all those kind of environment of the price is quite effective. So I think that, but the problem of that challenge is that kind of economy that we can't really tackle as a practitioner, or at least me as a young one. I think I have no such a power on those. We won't say the name of magazine prices, but well, there is something that's quite interesting. That's funny that it's happened also at the end of the discussion, and after all that kind of beauty about the quality and the excellence. But yeah, well, I don't know if someone wants to jump on that idea.
I think Matevž is ready to jump on.
I think this award building really can be compared to advertising, and it has its very specific consumers, it has its very specific target audience, and it's basically hard to fight it. And you can actually fight it only in a way that you create or you develop your award in a very different way, that you give it more space and time for in-depth discussion, and I think that's exactly what you want to do with Plečnik Awards, also to develop accompanying programs that brings in different people that can reflect on topics that are brought in through awarded projects, that can start also earlier with a public discussion with the jury, for example. but basically it is very transparent and very clear about what it wants to do and who it wants to bring in and what it wants to achieve.
I'd maybe like to, just before you jump in, and I'm really sorry, you can really come back to that question, but first I'd like to invite LINA to maybe respond to this. I think that these kinds of roundtables happen quite often, and quite often it's the same people sitting around the same roundtable having the same discussion about how important this all is, that what we're doing. So this year you've been involved with 2 of the awards that we're discussing here today. So the Young Talent Mies and the Rohe Foundation, so the shortlist finalist?
I think we're
finalist?
No, shortlist or finalist.
Finalist, congratulations. And also receiving the Plečnik stipend, I think we're translating it. How do you view all of this?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I was thinking all the while you were talking about what do all the recipients of, for example, the Plečnik Awards this year actually have in common is, I think it's not anymore a recognition of beautiful objects. I mean, of course it still is, but everyone here, I think, recognized a certain opportunity in the real world, and used architecture to articulate that opportunity. For example, Krater did that with unused, unrecognized public space and the library and so on. And I think student work is exactly that. Especially master theses are always a kind of, you seek for an opportunity to do something in the world, not to create a beautiful object, but to make a shift, to maybe use architecture as a tool to articulate many different disciplines and combine them into a project, which is not necessarily a building. And no master theses are built, almost never, right? But we get so many interesting ideas, so many different opportunities. And for a fund like Plečnik's Award to award some master thesis, and for the award to not be just a monetary award, but actually a scholarship, a fund for something you can actually do with this idea you have, maybe on a smaller scale. I think this is the importance it should build on in the future, and maybe even find a way to incorporate this idea not just into the student projects, but also in other categories of the award. So yeah, I think and speaking of categories, the student category is the most general one, because it incorporates just, okay, student work. Everything else is very specific. This is a public space. This is a small scale intervention. This is student work. And as for the opportunities, I would like to share an anecdote, if I may. I got in touch with the owner of the site, of the land where I placed the factory, which was my master thesis, to ask him if we can film there, the video we did for the opening ceremony. And he said, yeah, no problem, yeah, go ahead. But what is this project of yours? What did you do? And he wants to sell the land. It's degraded. He wanted to build a sawmill. And now he's interested in this idea. And it's not really important if the exact project I envisioned is articulated or built, of course not, but to have an idea and to put it forward and to have a platform where I can talk about it and actually make a change, make, like from this completely idea stage of just a master's thesis everyone has to do into something that actually has an impact. I think that's the importance of these awards. And as for the Mies Awards, I can't really say as much, as I haven't been really involved other than sending the the materials. But I hope to get to the exhibition in Venice and the ceremony and so on. Yes, thank you.
And you open a discussion of like unconcerned thinking, which is very poetic. And I would like to use what Anna mentioned. She mentioned something very poetic that reverberated with me. And you mentioned the world that we want to live in. And
this quote, no? It's like we should not see the work of art, but the world according to that work. Yeah.
But,
which I think is the essence of what we're talking here.
So perhaps before we continue the debate next to the wine, in what kind of world, anyone can answer, do we want to live in? Either built, either renovated,
I know.
either written.
Leonard, it's really important what you said. It's actually the way, the structure, how architectural work is structured is mostly that you're waiting for somebody else to tell you what is to be done. And what needs to change is that actually we can use like the whole specter of our knowledge to decide what is our work. But the fact is that it's not paid mostly, you know. So this is the problem. And maybe we can speak about this, how the prizes can open the other structures for the work of architecture. And also what you said before, I think maybe you're stuck a bit in this thinking that the architecture is an object, and then this relation between individual and an object. I'm not sure. We can discuss later. But the Crater is not finished project. Also, Leonard project is not finished project, and the other Sebastian, I don't know if he's here. They are not concluded projects, and if you receive award for not concluded project or a project which is very fragile and is not because it's new in the system, the question is whether it will survive or not. This prize has a completely other influence. It is to empower the practice, not to be very proud of that we get it, because it would be much useful that we get another project and be financed to do something, you know. But in this sense of empowering, it's really strong. Yeah. And let's work all together on all the tasks where architect can be included in. And be open for that, and not just please follow mainstreams and all this blah, 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 blah.
But I think this is the exact nature of your project, that it's never concluded. If it's ever concluded, then it's dead. So I think it's very good that there are projects as such, and they need to be supported.
I'd like to add something. We started our practice looking into existing educational buildings and how we could intervene. We did not start the practice or our work out of, let's say, some much higher goal than to actually work on things that we were kind of taught to do. So design, we were looking for work. At that time, the time of the financial crisis, there were no competitions. The established model of creating a practice, creating your own means of survival, was working on a competition, winning, establishing a practice, getting paid. At that time, that did not exist, so we started actually looking into ways how we can find work for ourselves and to change things. So this was kind of building on the experience that we had as students, then Hana, how to get involved with the world, how to start making sort of an impact on the world, bit by bit. But what I'm saying, and I think in a way that also works with Crater, is that you are looking for things that will help you survive, finding work in a way. So in the essence, what I think you said was, for you maybe now is more important how to find funding next than to be awarded. And for us in the beginning, it was more important than anything how to find work. And that's what we did when we started the practice. And I think that's more and more going to be the case with young practices. I believe that let's say outside of Slovenia, it's already been the case for much, much longer, and Slovenia is just getting more and more obvious.
Anyone else? Yeah, please, Nate, go ahead.
Maybe I'll just add some words on what Danica said and Matevž before. In the core of landscape, it's always unfinished. So awarding this shift in this year's award is kind of a shift towards more landscape approach, I would say, in a way. So awarding unfinished projects is also, I'm maybe more glad for your award than our award in this sense, if I'm exaggerating a little bit. But yeah, it's in the core of landscape architecture, core of landscape. Each project is unfinished. You're always predicting what will happen with some project. Then you always have the question of maintenance. It's a question of disappointment. It was already mentioned today. What will happen in a few years? So it gives also to the jurors a kind of responsibility to recognize the potentials of the space. It's especially if you're giving an award to something that was newly developed, or you're just seeking the potentials of the space. What will happen there in a few years? You're not rewarding the image, the current state. And that's also the difficulty or the problem of this Instagram clickbait prizes that are only based on images.
I would just like to address the question, Allan, you posed, I think, in the beginning. What are some of the concrete effects of a prize for an individual? At first, I wasn't sure what the answer would be, but during the discussion, let's say, at least for our context in Slovenia, getting certain award means also quite substantial effect on individual, because awards also improve your chances of getting state support. There's quite a large system of state support for creative sector, especially architects as well. So basically, receiving an award, especially Plečnik Award, basically means open doors for something that enables social security for individuals. So it has a really concrete result. So that's one issue. The other is also additional, in the same line, it can also mean social security after you retired. So awards can
this
have
is getting
really
so bad, but I like it so much.
It's not bad. It's just you asked. So this is the state.
It's not bad. I think it's one of the rare things that.
Yeah. But I just want to.
It's important.
Because
please continue.
When I remembered this part, I was thinking, what is the meaning of this hyperinflation of awards? They have concrete effects. I think it's business development, PR, content creating. It has certain effect either on those who organize the awards and also those who participate. I think it's mainly business or financial orientated, but it has some effect. So these effects also can reflect how the jury decides, in a sense, let's say in the background, or there's a certain awareness that this award will affect the individual who receives it. So I think it's an important question. What are the concrete results besides, of course, how does this reflect on our profession? Which I agree, it's crucial. But this concrete opens up a new, interesting aspect of it.
Thank you very much. That social security is something that we talked about in the previous debate last month, and actually I think we concluded also the debate with that idea. I think it's really thank you, because I think it's important just to state it, just to say, there is nothing bad or good about the price. It's a tool that exists and that we can make a shift or not. And we have indirect results that we like. We have also direct effects that we don't really want to talk about, but they exist. And I think if we, and that's why I was asking that question, that weird question so much, and what is the price for, and blah, blah, blah. Because I think that those concrete effects can also be a little bit changed or be influenced by the institution of the price or the people that apply, because they want other concrete effects. And if the concrete effects are only related to that security, it also tells a lot about the state of the practice that we're in, and that's it. And I think that's what is super interesting about the Plečnik Award, and especially the student one. And that's also a conversation that we already had. But, how we can use that super strong platform, that super strong also collectiveness of the prices to help all that kind of common goods that we want, all that kind of new shifting that we aim for. I think the institution that gives the price, and especially for the institution, maybe like the magazines one or another topic in another debate, but we can use that power to also help directly on those specific effects. And that's all of that kind of little ideas that I was talking about. And I don't think I'm like directly criticizing a price or another. I think like the French prices that I'm involved in are way worse in terms of secret, in terms of process than here. But I think we need to talk about those processes and those direct effects to make the shift. Because like for the student one, if the debate never came about what is the price for, and then now it's starting to, it's a stipendium that somehow is kind of a residency, or it's time to work on the thing, it's time to continue. It's how you make the shift on the prices. But if we keep like, being a little bit shy about telling those direct effects or those kind of sides of the price, we can't make like those really super important changes. Because I think the student one is can be life-changing or career-changing in a way. So maybe we can start by the student one, and as you said, implement it in the others, and maybe think more how the price can evolve. Is it a financial one? Is it only about PR? Is it only about legitimacy? There is a debate that needs to be open. I don't think I have like answers, as I say, and I think we have like individual answers, and that's why there are like so many topics on the roundtables. But I think it's super interesting to kind of use really the price as a collective tool, and that's why we need like collective debate on it, and to tackle all the challenges, either if they are quite indirect, either if they are like super pragmatic and super, kind of obscene to say, but it's also about security, it's also about finances, it's sometimes about price, legitimacy, quality of architecture, and I think we like more those parts, but there are like many aspects. Thank you. If someone wants to jump in.
Yeah, I think that the point that you raised, and then I interrupted you abruptly, it would be so nice that an architectural award wouldn't define your status, either when you stop working or when you are working. So perhaps that's a good start. Any concluding thoughts?
Maybe not concluding thoughts, just thoughts. It's nice to get an award because it's a affirmation of your work. I think that the people that are usually awarded in, like, let's say, Plečnik Awards are people that would be doing this irregardless whether they're awarded or not. And they would continue to do so even if they didn't get the award. So I think the biggest importance of awards by far is this affirmation effect of your colleagues that are involved in the same profession and know how hard it is to fight this fight, to produce architecture, space, effects in public, social aspects and everything. So I think this is by far the most important thing. And not expecting, in a way, anything from the award, maybe this is like this higher motive or something, is also the main difference. Like, if you pay for something, you expect to get something. If you don't pay for something and you get the award, it's the highest thing that you can possibly achieve. If you pay for it, it has no meaning. So that's, and also in this sense, maybe sort of like financial awards start bringing it down. In a sense, it's starting to become this social, like, help for the struggling in a way, which I don't think at our level or at the level that we want to work at is the most important thing. Not to say that people need to survive, but I think that people find a way to survive and they're really good at it. And the problem is that it's being used as a, let's say, a tool of assessing who of the struggling artists should get money to survive doing what they actually do and are really good at.
Maybe just quickly, because there's one is these money machines, these big awards that are actually money machines, and you pay £950 just to get in, to submit, and maybe you don't get anything, but probably you do. And then there are others that are free, but in between we still somehow, where our award is, it's really not so expensive to participate, but we are not depending on public money, and so we need to somehow survive. And we try to keep it low. But just to say before on the real effects of the award, that probably also what we are trying to do is also to make something out of this award so that the professional community around us would somehow expect our statement every year, and also to have that part to be that this is also a critique in a way to the professional community. And we also in the juries, we also try to grasp what we selected, what is that whole, what the combination of those awards, what they contribute to, and what kind of messages are sent out. So we try to find our own voice in a way, and not try to be universal, because I don't think there are some universal criteria to anything. So probably just to have a kind of identity and yeah, to find the identity.
Thanks so much. I'd like to invite you to continue all of these debates, because there's so many, and to write up a list of things that we suggest to the Plečnik Fund for its work in the future. But I think to sum up everything that was said today, I think that these prizes that were conferred this year really showed, even if perhaps we did it a little bit later, that even our national awards and the architecture that is produced within Slovenia and abroad, of course, I think, is moving in a direction that might indicate that someday, maybe, architecture might be an agent of change for a change that we desperately need. And I think it's definitely architects and landscape architects and urbanists, even though maybe they're not present today, and spatial practitioners in general are vital in this role of helping, making our society inhabit a space that is more welcoming to not only our species, but other things and beings that inhabit our planet as well. Thanks so much for this debate. And yeah, thank you for all your really valuable inputs. And congratulations again to all the winners. Thank you.
Thank you.